Welcome back to the Ultraviolet Tide. It is July. So Leah Adams and well, no, not Leah Adams anymore. Oh my goodness, we have a married woman amongst us. We are here to talk about July, being UV Awareness Month. Leah, welcome to the podcast. Hello, happy wife.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Erica. It's good to be back and back as a wifey. The last time we recorded, I was still a fiance. So I will tell you, nothing feels much different, but here we are.
I know, I love it. I felt the exact same way when I got married. I'm like, people are like, do you feel different? I'm like, no, we've been together for like 5, 6 years. Like, it kind of just feels like our same old, honestly.
Exactly. Jeff and I have been together. This is our eighth year. So it's like we've been married the
Yep.
last five. It's just been unofficial.
Yeah, I love it. And with it being UV Awareness Month, honestly, this episode kind of planned itself so beautifully because there have been so many stories that I have been reading about SPF and UPF efficacy. And when I started putting together this episode, I was like, man, we could literally dedicate an episode to just these two stories. So that's kind of what we're doing today is we picked one story about SPF efficacy that you guys are really talking about online right now. And we are also thinking about it and talking about it. And then the next story is about UPF clothing. And both of these stories they kind of make you a little bit nervous. So we're going to talk through the facts of the case. Leah's going to give me her opinion and kind of like share the consumer's perspective of what she thinks, as we're listening and as we're thinking through these things, how as a consumer we can kind of digest this to continue being our own best advocates and not let things like this really scare us away from making really good choices for our skin and skin health. So to kick things off, Leah, I have been playing a little bit of an investigative journalist, if you will, because I saw a story come out a couple weeks ago about the super famous sunscreen brand Ultraviolet, which has absolutely no affiliation with Low Ultraviolet, completely different brands. But for those who do not know, Ultraviolet is a sunscreen brand based in Australia. And you might recognize the name because they just recently launched into the US earlier this summer. So they had a huge push in Sephora's in the United States and kind of bringing attention to the US. So if you recognize that name, it's probably from all of the media coverage and everything they've been doing as they launched into the US earlier this year. But what they probably weren't expecting is this crazy bad press that came out a few weeks ago. And the bad press that came out was from a consumer group called Choice. And they pride themselves in being consumer advocates. So they do reviews on products, they share all of these things, really trying to align themselves with the consumer and saying, hey, we got your back. And what happened is they published an article testing sunscreens, 20 sunscreens that supposedly had an SPF rating of 50. And they found that 16 out of the 20 of them did not meet their labeling claims. And so, of course, when I see this come across my desktop, I was like, well, tell me more. I need to know everything. And the number one sunscreen that fared the worst on that list was the Ultraviolet Lean Screen SPF 50. And when Choice did testing, they found it fared way below the UPF 50 plus claim and found it had an SPF rating of 4 to 5. Leah, I see you like shaking your head and rolling your eyes because, like, how on earth does a product that is being sold as an SPF 50 have an SPF rating of 4 to 5 when testing that is done? And that is the exact same thing I thought too. I was like going to Ultraviolet's social media page. I'm waiting for a response. I'm trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And as I'm going to their social media accounts, so are so many other people just basically destroying this company, saying like, I trusted you to, protect my skin and everything like that. And now you're telling me this product doesn't even work. Like, what the heck? So Ultraviolet came out a couple days later with like a huge Instagram post saying that they work with TGA licensed manufacturers, which basically is part of the health department in Australia regulating these goods. And they ran rigorous in-house testing and external testing as well. And they found that the product in the first test had an SPF rating of 64 And in the second test, an SPF rating of 61. Aaliyah, I'm sure you're like me, like, how the heck is that possible? I see you shaking your head.
The math is not mathing.
It's not mathing. It's definitely not mathing. And furthermore, when the owner, one of the co-owners, took to Instagram to share about this, they said that Lean Screen has a 22.75% zinc oxide as its makeup. So as I'm thinking that through that too, I'm like, well, that's basically impossible to get an SPF rating of 4. Like that is a lot of zinc. So how is that possible? So we're going to pause there for a second and let's talk a little bit about as a consumer when we see this, how do you feel? So Leah, I kind of given you the bare bones of this and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into it, but just knowing this information as a consumer, are you like, I would throw out the sunscreen immediately? Like how would you feel as a consumer?
I have so many thoughts around this article, Erica, because especially for people that really trust and only use one product or brand when it comes to sunscreen or really skincare in general, this is a total letdown to the consumer. And for people that know and love a product and then see this news, it breaks trust with a brand, and it can be hard for somebody to find a new product or brand after that because like anything that happens in life, once you kind of get screwed over or something bad happens, it's hard to trust, people or things or brands again. Um Another thing is like we talked about this, I think, before we started recording, Erica, is that right now in the world we're living in, there's a lot of controversy about even wearing sunscreen in general. And this type of PR and press is not ideal for
Yeah.
the controversy world we're living in around sunscreen, because this essentially could be in those individuals' favor of those that may believe that sunscreen causes cancer or sunscreen's not good for you. And obviously, those are very untrue statements. But when something like this happens with a brand in the media, it doesn't look that good. So I was really sad to see this. I've actually never tried this brand. And I was actually kind of like, okay, maybe it's a good thing. Like I didn't try it, after seeing it, but I've always wanted to try it. But again, I think this also speaks to that this could happen with any brand. Nobody is perfect. Not everything, comes down to a T all the time. And there are people, behind this, it's a human error. Like a lot of things happen sometimes, but I don't know. I guess I was really like upset and shocked and just concerned for the brand, but also really concerned for the consumer after reading this, because it just makes me worry about truly the thousands of people that use this product or use this brand that
Mhm.
may or may not have second thoughts around potentially wearing sunscreen moving forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. So as I was reading through, this story is honestly an emotional roller coaster because I had those same thoughts to begin with too. I was like, one, you put a sunscreen on yourself, your kids, because you trust that it's going to keep you safe, especially if you are a skin cancer, melanoma survivor, thriver. You literally put your heart and soul into the product you trust to keep you safe. So that was my first thought too of like, oh my God, this is terrifying. And then as I did a little bit of a deep dive, I got really angry. And here's why. So basically, when these results came out, Choice reached out to Ultraviolet before this article even went live. So this was back in March, I believe. They reached out to them and they're like, hey, we purchased your product from this distributor. Here's the results we had. And to that, the Ultraviolet team said, thank you so much for letting us know. We're going to retest because I don't know how that's possible. And we want to make sure that if there's something wrong with our product, we are testing again because we want to protect the consumer. So love that. Snaps to them because that is the right answer for what to do. They really care about the consumer. And when they did the test, it came back as a 61.7 SPF rating, well above the benchmark to label a product as an SPF of 50 plus. So they went back to Choice and they said, okay, we got a rating that is still aligned. What is going on? So Choice did another round where they got an SPF rating of 5. So now they've had two tests, SPF of 4, SPF of 5. Whereas Ultraviolet has also done two tests of the SPF a lot higher. So again, emotional roller coaster, you guys, but we aren't even close to the craziness of this. So both of the tests that were done the second time were accredited labs and set to the standards of Australia and New Zealand, which are the highest benchmarks for sun safety because we have talked about this time and time again, Leah. We know that their standards are the highest when it comes to sun safety because of their incidence rates. And what Ultraviolet found is that Choice had super small testing groups. So the first cohort they did was 5 individuals, and I believe it was either 2 or 3 of which actually didn't pass the standards for what they were looking for. So they actually, their results weren't even into the test. And
Wow.
then when they did the second one, it was still only a cohort of 5 people. So at this time, they've tested on 7 to 8 people in total, and that's the information that they used. We also found out that they decanted the sunscreen. So they took it out of the packaging, put it in a container. I don't know what the container was. I don't know the specifics, and sent it to the lab for testing. And as you and I know, Leah, you literally don't do that with sunscreen because the second you take it out of the container, it's exposed to the elements. You could ruin that sunscreen like really instantly.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that they decanted the product. Now, all of these communications are going back and forth. Ultraviolet finds out this information. They tell it to Choice. They say, oh, when you do this to a mineral sunscreen, like there is a chance of just completely ruining it because you expose it to the elements and it's in its packaging for a reason. Like sunscreen packaging is to protect the product. They told all of this to Choice. Choice still published these findings because they know it's clickbait, it's going to get people talking,
Wow.
and they actually failed 16 out of 20 sunscreens. But now we know they decanted the product. They took it out of a bottle and put it into another thing that basically ruined the efficacy of the product. So a lot to say about that. First thing, like we can learn something about decanting products and like keeping them in the packaging. But Leah, how do you feel now kind of knowing all that information that they still knew this and decided to publish this article?
I mean, you just said it. It's clickbait. And that's
Clickbait.
again the world that we are living in. It's like, what can we use as a headline to completely demolish a brand, a reputation, everything, have people rethink, oh gosh, is this a good sunscreen? Is it a not good sunscreen? And it's really, really unfortunate. I mean, it really
Mm-hmm.
makes me sad. And you're absolutely right. Like, what an emotional roller coaster reading this article, reading this story. And it's really unfortunate. And that's another thing that I was thinking too is like knowing that this press was around an SPF 50, that also worries me. That are people not going to trust like a higher SPF? Are they going
Yeah.
to trust, only a lower SPF? Are they going to think, oh, does a higher than 50, is that going to even work? There's a lot of people are just going to start questioning and have fears and concerns and worries. And at the end of the day, that can impact their sun safety behaviors, which could also impact their risk of potentially developing skin cancer, melanoma, because as we all know, if we're not wearing sunscreen, if we're not protecting our skin, that could be that could jeopardize our health for our largest organ. Again, it just like it really worries me and it concerns me, and it's just really, really, it's a low blow to still
Yeah.
go ahead and like publish something like that just to really get really get a rise out of people and kind of like rile people up a little bit.
It's so frustrating because I feel like they actually felt like these results were valid. But when you look at it, you're like, okay, this actually had 3 valid results, this test. And there have been so many instances. I know there was an instance with Supergoop a few years ago where a consumer came out and did their own like individual testing and said that one of their products didn't have the same SPF rating. And it was a whole class action, like not lawsuit, but a class action complaint basically.
Mhm.
And when that came out, our stance was basically like, stop doing your at home testing. Like,
Yeah.
You in your kitchen doing a science experiment is not the same as these accredited certified labs that are coming in and doing the test, because I don't know if people know how like sunscreen is tested, but my understanding of it, and if I'm wrong, I would love for someone to tell me who's like actually in the sunscreen industry, because you guys should come on and tell us more about it. But my understanding of how it's tested is that you quite literally have people that are like burned, and the timing is taken for that, and then they apply the sunscreen, and then they're basically burned again to see the efficacy and how long the product lasts. So my understanding is that's kind of how that works. And if only 3 out of the 5 participants in one of the studies actually had valid results, you don't know like what kind of skin tone do they have. Like, you know how the scale is when it comes to like the skin type, like the fairer you are, the more easily you burn and everything like that. We don't know like what kind of, we just don't know so
Right.
much information. And I know that doesn't matter, because still having an SPF rating of 4 and 5 is like terrifying. So if someone gets this product and decants it,
Yeah.
that's potentially the safety that they're getting.
Yeah. And let me tell you, I used an SPF 4 before melanoma. I mean,
Yeah.
you just might as well not wear anything. I mean, that's kind of where it's at. I used SPF 4 tanning oil.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah, it's super, super unfortunate, the whole situation. And I think it just goes back to kind of what I said earlier, that trust is such an important thing when in every way, shape, and form when it comes to a brand and the relationship with the brand and the consumers and the brand and the lab. And there's got to be consistency. There has to be trustworthiness. There has to be transparency. And it's when it comes down to potentially impacting people's lives and their health,
Hmm.
and that's when it gets to be really problematic. And this brand, from what I know, is a huge brand. And it's ironic that this brand, and its connection to Australia, knowing we've talked about Australia on the podcast before, the high incidence rates of melanoma, it's it's not okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, it'll just be interesting to kind of see, like, with this type of press and media, how is this going to shape the future? Basically, I would say probably, I know right now, like for us, it's summer in the States,
Hmm.
but in Australia, it's like kind of their winter, it's their colder season. But it'll just be
Hmm.
interesting to see over the next year, maybe even 2 years, what this does to the brand, what this does
Right.
to people that once trusted this brand, trusted this product, and where it's going to take them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think another thing that really comes out of this that we've talked about so many times is this allows people to kind of come in and have a mineral versus chemical sunscreen debate, because the sunscreens that fare the worst for mineral sunscreens, and people have really, really strong opinions about which is better. And it's really frustrating because, Leah, you and I both have sunscreens that we love. We like sunscreens better than others, right? We like some mineral, we like some chemical, but we're not going to go and tell people if they're using a different product that they're using the wrong product. Because at the end of the day, as long as they are not using tanning oil, they're not using baby oil, they're not using their at-home concoction that they've made, as long as they are wearing sunscreen, that is all I care about. And the mineral versus chemical sunscreen debate is just, things like this give fuel to the fire.
Mhm. Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, everything that you just said is so true. Like, I wear both chemical and mineral. I personally believe that you need to wear what works for you and your
Yeah,
lifestyle and your skin. We are all different. And it really just comes down to, are you wearing sunscreen? And
yeah,
I've said this many, many times on all the content I make for social media. There's absolutely no research, no data, no evidence that shows that sunscreen causes cancer.
yeah,
Sunscreens go through a very rigorous process in this country and other parts of the world to be sure that they can go on shelves and go on people's skin.
Hmm.
And until there's something out there that shows otherwise and shows something different, I'm going to keep preaching that, because there's so many people that are believing that, and it's extremely harmful. And we got to stop this debate around mineral versus chemical, because at the end of the day, the best SPF that you can wear is the one that you remember to put on every single day, and the one that you
Hmm.
remember to put on your family members and your children and your friends. And that is point blank, period. Like, end of
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And I think it's also best to make the decisions that work the best for your life. I wore different sunscreen products when I was pregnant than I do now. And that's just based off of the support of my doctor. So some people are coming out and they're like, I hate it when doctors tell you to choose one or the other. But I'm like, I understand in some sense because when you're pregnant, you can't take like any medication. Like I had COVID when I was pregnant, and let me tell you, that was rough because you can't take like anything.
Yeah.
So I do understand, when dermatologists and doctors come and they're like, hey, you're pregnant, it's best if you use this type of product. I'm going to listen to that because that is my doctor,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's my doctor, Lee. It's not your doctor. It's not Sally's doctor down the street. Like we all have such different needs. And at the end of the day, wear sun protective clothing, wear sunscreen. If you're like so nervous about some of these products on the market and you don't want to put them on your body, layer up on sun protective clothing, find one that works for you, and kind of carry on. Keep calm and carry on.
Keep calm and carry on.
Oh man. Yeah, I don't want to get too preachy on it, but I know it's been like such a big debate. And so that was our first article all about sunscreen. So, we kind of had our moment to kind of preach about sunscreen and everything. So now let's talk about UPF clothing because another story came out about a Chinese garment factory was caught producing fake UV clothing, falsifying testing reports for UPF certifications, and printing fake UPF labels. So again, this was quite like when I saw that story come through from Ultraviolet. I saw this story come through and I knew we had to talk about it. So when I dug into this, I found all the information I just said above, but also I found that one of the products, like one out of the many that they manufacture, sold over 300,000 units last year. And so, of course, this starts the debate of like, well, what unsafe goods are not actually what they say they are. And unlike sunscreen, sun protective clothing it doesn't go through an FDA approval process. It is technically, the FTC technically oversees labeling of the products, but its total enforcement of these claims is super unclear. So they are supposed to be overseeing labeling and marketing and all of those communication things, but I don't think the extent of it is as robust as something that the FDA does when it comes to sunscreen and going through that whole process. So basically, what this causes is one, this factory came out and they're like, okay, well, where's the distribution? Where are these products? And we don't know. And then two, we know in the US, the FTC is doing something, but we don't know the extent of which they are protecting consumers from people labeling their items as UPF. So I'm going to pause right there, Leah. I know this is another hard one to digest. What are your thoughts?
I mean, these stories just keep getting better and better. Um, I mean, another total letdown. I mean,
Yeah,
300,000 units of something that is labeled to protect
UPF.
somebody's skin that is not actually made to protect their skin. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's like going to the drugstore and getting like Tylenol or something and taking it, and it's like a placebo drug, and people find out and they're like, why is my pain not going away? Or like, it's that's just like what I thought about is like, people, if individuals just wanted a normal jacket, they could have got a normal jacket at any other brand, any other store. But when people are actively and purposefully buying sun safe UPF clothing, it's because they want to protect their skin. And you just brought this up before, Erica. There are people that choose to wear UPF clothing over sunscreen due to sensory issues, skin issues, what have you. So it's really problematic when you have a brand that is supposed to be making sun safe clothing UPF clothing, and find out that it's not, like,
Yeah.
that's a huge issue, and it goes back to the first article. It's harming people's skin, it's harming their health and their lifestyle, and so, you know, all I wear is sunscreen and protective clothing at this point as a
Mhm.
melanoma survivor, and,
Yeah.
that was a big step for me to find brands that I trust and find brands and products that I wanna wear, and if this was a brand and a product that I have been purchasing from or, wearing and then finding this out, I would have been devastated because again,
Yeah.
it's like breaking that trust. And, it kind of also can bring back some emotions around like, man, like, if I never had melanoma, I wouldn't have to be worrying about this kind of stuff. And then you can go down that spiral. I mean, it can go in so many different directions, but I think at the end of the day, Erica, it's another letdown of a brand that just should not be doing what they're doing.
What's crazy though too is like when I think about this, like as a small independent brand, finding out this information would be terrifying. If you thought that you were purchasing fabric that had a UPF rating, just to find out that the reports on the testing were falsified and they were mislabeled, I, as a consumer, would not be, or as a brand owner, would not be able to sleep at night. So that's the hard part too, is this factory was doing this, but who knows how many independent small brands were seeing, they did their due diligence. They're looking at the reports. They're seeing that it came in properly. And they're like, perfect, we're going to purchase this fabric and then go with it. That is terrifying. Like to the point that when I read this article, I went back through every single one of our certifications to make sure that they like were 100% solid, not falsified. They were real because that is like terrifying for a small brand that doesn't have a lot of resources,
Mhm.
especially when I was starting out in 2020, there were not a lot of producers out there of sun protective fabrics. So you literally had to take their word as gold because you didn't have the ability to send it for additional testing if you had questions on it, because that would be, you know, $1,000, $2,000, however many
Yeah.
dollars that you didn't have in your bank account. And you also didn't know a lot about this industry because so much information has come out over the past 5 years that we know now that we didn't have then. I think it's really funny that I shared this blog post that we wrote on this topic. I showed like a little bit of a Instagram breakdown, and someone commented and they said, I have a UPF tracker device that basically tells you the UPF rating, and I take all of my garments outside and I test it with that. That's incredible. That did not exist in 2020, and that is so cool to be able to do that.
Yeah, I want that product,
I,
wherever that
it's
is. That is, like, so, so cool. And, yeah, I'm like, really like this, like I read the sunscreen article before. I'm like, really, this is like really, it's
mhm.
just it's really, really sad. And the thing that I think about, I think the Skin Cancer Foundation wrote an article about this around UPF clothing. And a lot of people don't understand really to this day. I mean, even though it's been around for a while, more and more brands are coming out as sun safe brands. People still think that like a normal white t-shirt can do the same protection
I
as
know.
a UPF like white t-shirt, and that's
Yeah.
not accurate at all. I mean, it comes down to the fabric, it comes down to how it's woven. It has to go through testing. Like
Hmm.
there's a reason why this exists. And
Right.
again, like small brands like you were talking, Erica, how you're like, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. It's because you care. You care about the
Yeah.
people that are
Right.
wearing your
Yeah.
brand and your clothing. And I'm just going to say it. This may be controversial. Feel free to edit this out. But there's a difference between a small brand like yours and a big factory cranking out 100,000 units of something,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, I try to support small brands because I know that there is that care, there is that compassion factor, there is that literally blood, sweat, and tears woven into that UPF from a
Yeah.
small brand
Literally.
because you care and there's that mission there. And
Yeah.
there are some other UPF Sunsafe brands like on Amazon. I'm not going to name brands, but the heart's not there, the mission's not there, it's different. And so
Hmm.
I'm saying it's just ironic that something like
Yeah.
this happened, because I
Yeah.
also know that, we live in a really interesting world, how some people are in it for the money, some people are
Yeah.
in it for, X, Y, and Z. But I think it's just also speaks to, you really have to know the brand that you're purchasing from and trust it and do some research, because there's a lot of brands out there, and there's a reason why some people gravitate to some and others gravitate to others. So,
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. You brought up so many good points that kind of have my brain going in multiple different directions. But when I kind of shared this article, Leah Make Derm Sure, she reached out to me and she was like, "Holy smokes, like I am not gonna lie, like I found this $14 shirt on Amazon and it's really appealing because it's UPF and UPF is expensive and I want to purchase it because I want more UPF garments. But after reading this, like I'm scared that it's not actually UPF. What
mm,
tips do you have for spotting fake garments?" And I was like, I will tell you the information I have, and I'll share that with the listeners today too, for how to spot these items. But as Leah said, it comes down to the brand and knowing like they're actually a reputable brand. So when it comes to spotting a fake garment, and there are good products on Amazon, like I'm not saying that they aren't there. They're there. You just have to be able to search for them. And one of the biggest things that you can do is before you purchase a product, copy and paste that brand name into your search bar. You should be able to pull up information that's like a website, in-depth information about like where they're manufactured, where are they located, are they in the US, are they abroad? You should be able to find this information. And your first red flag should be if you go to research the brand and nothing pulls up. You don't see anything and you're like, huh, well, okay, it's possible, but red flag number one, right?
mhm.
That's not the great thing. You want to be able to find a website with robust information that you could even reach out to if you have a question. So if anyone reaches out to us and they're like, I need to see your certifications, I'm like, okay, let's hop on a call. Let's do it. I'll give you the information. You need to be able to find like that level of trust with these kinds of products. And the second thing that you can look for is, Leah, you brought up the Skin Cancer Foundation. Their seal of recommendation is a great tool. Now, I won't say that it covers like every single fantastic UPF product that's out there, but it's a great starting place
Mhm.
of, when you look at some of the products that have that seal of recommendation, what things are we seeing that transfer over from brand to brand?
Mhm.
You're going to start seeing some things that register in your brain as, oh, credible, reliable, all of those things. You can kind of take that knowledge into other brands to do the same kind of, well, that's interesting. This one brand had this information, but it's missing on this website. Interesting. You can
Mhm.
start forming a little bit of a fuller picture. So that is the second thing. And the third thing is watch out for red flags. I had someone on Instagram 2 months ago reach out to me and they said, I heard about UPF 2000. Do you know anything about this? And I was like, girlfriend,
What?
that's scientifically inaccurate. The
Oh my
highest
god.
you can get is a UPF rating of 50 plus. That is the highest. Now, there are some products that when they go and they go through testing do have a higher rating than UPF 50 plus, but when they label them, when they market them, when it is sold on Amazon, it's the highest you can put on there is a UPF of 50 plus. So if you see an item that's labeled UPF 2000 and then you go to search that brand and you don't find any information on them, red flag. You
Yeah.
should be like alarm bells.
Yeah. No, and we don't have time for red flags. We need all the green flags, okay? Especially when it comes to sun safety, green flags all day. Like, if you're not a green
Hmm.
flag, bye.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's fascinating because when stories like this come out, yes, it makes me really mad as a small independent brand because our costs are high for a reason because we purchase quality fabric and we have a quality manufacturer. And I'm not going to say that all products that are more expensive are better because I feel like then you fall into a little bit of a hole. It's like, okay, well, this shirt's $50. It must be better. That's not always the case because in the blog post I share, I did link some products that are in that $20 category that are fantastic products. So I'm not going to say that a certain price point means it's better or worse, but I think this is going to be super fascinating because it's going to kind of start some um, legitimacy like questions. I don't know how to say that word. I was like,
No.
how do I say this
I know
word?
I know what you're trying to say. I mean, these two articles, even though they're talking about two different products, there's very similar themes here. Something
Hmm.
happened with a brand that potentially harmed or impacted the consumers and individuals. And now we kind of wait and see how those consumers and how those individuals move forward when it comes to finding another product or trusting another brand and
Hmm.
product. And you
Yeah.
bring up a lot of great tips and tricks, Erica, around how to find out if a brand is trustworthy or reputable. Another thing too, read reviews. Read reviews of people. I mean, I think reviews sometimes are really powerful. I mean, like take some for a grain of salt. Like there's like those Harry Potter novel reviews. It's like one bad experience and then like,
Right.
obviously like that. But like if you see a consistent theme of positive reviews or like somebody shares like a really cool story about the product or the brand, I mean, I think that can also speak volumes because as you know, Erica, we live in such a high stimulated society right now where the second I open my phone, there's ads for I don't know how many products.
Yeah.
It's to the point where it's kind of overwhelming sometimes where you're like, oh my goodness, like I just need one product, but I just got 72 ads for like
Yeah.
a similar
Right.
product. It's like, which one do I
Uh-huh.
choose, And so I guess what I'm trying to say is like knowledge is power and you have to really do your own work and research when it comes to finding a sunscreen that you know and trust and that you will wear. Uh, find a UPF or sun safe clothing brand that works for you and that you trust. Not every brand is right for everybody. Not every product is right for everybody, but I will say there's something out there for everybody. And sometimes it doesn't take overnight to find that product or brand, especially if you've been literally burned by a product or a brand
Yeah. Literally.
or something like that. But I think, you know, kind of my in summary of both of these articles is like don't lose hope and faith in another brand that could be the one to ultimately protect you that you trust that you like. I know myself, I've gone through tons of brands. I found out what I loved, I found out what I didn't like, and then I found out you know that also my things that I like aren't what everybody else likes sometimes and vice versa, and that's okay. So I think this is just a really big eye opener for our listeners and just kind of everybody out there to don't always kind of fall for things like right off the bat, like really do your research and really advocate for yourself too. Because I think
Hmm.
that's another thing too. Some people, when they find a brand that's highly rated and has all these really great reviews, and maybe they don't love it, but sometimes people don't feel like they don't feel comfortable enough to share their true experience. I
Yeah.
think also people should have a space to do that too.
Hmm.
Because again, like maybe there's that one person that's like, oh my gosh, out of these 50 reviews, there was one that, wasn't that great, but that I really resonated with. Like it's not just me kind of thing.
Yeah.
So now I'm kind of all over the place with my thoughts, but I just think there's so many takeaway like points from both of these articles, but you just really, really got to pay attention to what's out there. And if something like this happens in the press with that brand that you were using or product you were using,
Hmm.
don't just say, okay, I can't do sun protection anymore. Please don't do that. There's
Right.
so many options out there today, which that's the most beautiful era we're in right now. There are so many sunscreens.
Yeah.
There's so many sun safe brands. There's something out there for everybody. Just find something that you love and make it a consistent part of your life.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a shameless plug that I have to add in here is one of the biggest reasons that we pivoted from being an independent sun safety brand to what we are doing now as a marketplace with all of these products is because they are tested by our team. Every single product. We are testing, we are seeing if we like it. there have been a ton of products we've tested that we have not liked. And you guys don't see that. And Leah, maybe to your point, like maybe we need to start sharing some of that stuff as kind of constructive criticism,
Mhm.
not to like, you know, have the brand. It's hard because when it's smaller brands, you don't want to give feedback that might hurt their business, right? Because you want to be supportive and everything. But right now, what I can say is if you find products on our website, either through our marketplace or through Shops Unvetted, those products are quite literally vetted by a whole host of people, including myself, who are trying them. And I will tell you that if I am recommending something for a child, it means I have been putting it on my own baby, like sun protective clothing at this point, because he's too young for sunscreen. But if you see sun protective clothing that's on there that's geared toward a child, it means I feel comfortable putting it on my child. And that's the whole reason behind why we made this pivot is like we see these stories come out and they are scary and they are overwhelming and you don't know where to turn to. The fact that people read these stories and turned to us and they're like, okay, what advice do you have is so kind. Like that makes my heart so happy because I'm like, let us be your advocate. Like
Right.
we will figure out this stuff together. But that is the biggest thing that we've seen is like there are a lot of brands out there and it's hard to know which ones are the best, which ones work for different lifestyles of if you have kids, if you are an athlete, if you know, want to sit out on the beach but want to stay sun safe. Like there are so many products out there. And then one last tidbit that I did want to kind of share is when it comes to our products, we had a dermatologist come and test a lot of our products like at the beginning, and the feedback she gave us about our long sleeves is that her and her kids all wore them and they had sunscreen on their hands and the shirts on them. And when they went to take the shirts off at the end, they had a tan line right here from where the sunscreen was and not where the sun shirt was. So when I say our products are vetted, that is what I mean. That like you go to take the shirt off and you are still pasty pale under that shirt, but you have a little tan where that sunscreen was because that is kind of sunscreen will still allow you to get a little bit of those UV rays. It just protects you as best it can as you apply it. So when I say these products are pre-vetted, that is what I mean. I'm
Mhm.
not just like getting products and like, oh, this is cute, you know?
Okay.
You know, we're really doing our best to be advocates for you guys and hopefully, you know, time to be authentic and educate buyers and, you know, be legitimate comes, I don't know where I'm going with this, but hopefully that's a helpful tool as we kind of enter this new era of consumers trying to be as educated and being their own best advocates as possible.
Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, that's really gonna really set you up for success is you have to educate yourself. You have to do your research and really sometimes dig because there's a lot of clickbait out there. And sometimes you may even just read a headline and it has actually no truth behind it. So I think it's just really not always taking everything for face value and sometimes really digging into a brand, a product, and, you know, anything like that. Um, because yeah, ain't nobody got time for
No time.
sunburns or bad sunscreen
No,
or not reliable UPF
no.
clothing. Like, no, no, no. We don't need that in our lives. Red flag, red flag.
Red flag. Not in today's day and age.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So if you guys want to read any of these stories, we'll link them in the show notes. It gives a lot more information about what's going on with Ultraviolet's lean sunscreen controversy, and then why not all sun protective garments are created equally. We'll link those in the show notes for you guys to read through because there's a ton more information in those posts that we couldn't get to in this episode. But Leah, I so appreciate you helping me break these down and kind of talk through something that causes a lot of stress and anxiety for those who are in this community on whether or not these products are working for them. So thanks for your help dissecting these today.
Oh, I am always here to break down an article and to spill the tea. So happy to be here.
I know it's a good episode when Sassy Leah comes out.
We love it when Sassy Leah comes out, or maybe not. I don't know. You listeners let me know.
Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will be back next month with another episode of the Top 5 on the Tide. But until then, take care, stay sun safe, and we'll see you guys super soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.